Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and this is the podcast where I've covered every episode of the G.I. Joe Real American Hero cartoon comic book. Extreme DIC. Cover it. If it was in the 80s or the 90s, I kind of covered it. I feel like I've gotten through I still need to circle back into like Spy Troops and stuff, which I believe was like late 90s. So anyway, but that's it. Welcome. I'm your host, Joe Slepsky. And we've talked about all that stuff. So we've been doing this for a while. If you're new to the show, go back into the archives and check all those out. And if you are new to the show, welcome aboard. And if you're an old listener, hello, friend. And we're back this week for another episode of Joe and Joe Illustrated, and continuing our Marvel Books adventure from last week. We are covering Operation Disappearance also from Marvel Books, and it is a gorgeous book. We got great feedback from last week's show. A lot of you guys went to 3djoes.com to look at these original pages, because I know a lot of us don't actually have these books. And these are those these small Marvel books are definitely off the beaten path books. So I get it if it's not in your collection and you've probably never come across them, but they're worth checking out. So remember, just like last week's spy book, you go to 3djoes.com and you'll see high-res scans of all these pages, and you can follow along with this read along, because that's what this show is. The show's always been like a read along, watch along kind of an episodic program where I want to ride with you through your adventure, and we'll have fun with it. That's kind of what we do on Joe and Joe. It's kind of what I've always wanted to do with this show, and that's kind of what we've always done. So I very much appreciate all of your ears as we go on that journey. If you want to say more and use not just your ears but your thumbs and send me some text, you can shoot me an email to joeonjoepod@gmail.com. You can reach out to me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at joeonjoepod. You can help support the show at patreon.com/joeonjoepod. And you can also help support us by giving some love to our sponsors, the Movies in a Meal podcast. In the beginning of time, the smallest organism gained sentience and thought to itself, I really need a good meal. Then, a bunch of other stuff happened, and finally the Lumiere brothers started showing movies in France. This was all the inspiration that fellow broadcasters Brad, Keith, and Ben needed to combine these two primal needs into the Movies in a Meal podcast. The Movies in a Meal is one of the most casual and relaxing film talk podcasts you could ever listen to. These three friends enjoy a good meal together while talking all about the movies. And not just reviews. They do favorite lists, comparison discussions, genre talks, anything and everything that you can think of. They've even broken their solemn promise inherent in the name and branched out into TV talk. So I love the variety of films they bring to the table. They cover new releases, classics, cult films, often in one episode. It's really a delight to listen to, and it has something for every movie fan out there to enjoy. So if you're looking to grow your podcast library, if you eat meals, and if you've ever seen a movie, then you should give Ben, Keith, and Brad a listen and subscribe to the Movies in a Meal podcast. They've been a great sponsor to this show. I love the Movies in a Meal podcast, and I'd like all of you to love them too. Oscars are right around the corner. I saw them setting up Hollywood Boulevard for that the other day. It's an all-week program. They shut the whole street down. It's a whole to-do. Perhaps you've heard of it. And it's always exciting. Last week, of course, Dune Part 2 was in theaters. It is good. It's real good. I mean, Dune's been so ripped off, and that's the sad of it. I've never read the book, so I'm not saying this as the guy with the original thought, but you see all this stuff on screen, and you're like, oh, I've seen that from that movie and that from that movie, and half of Star Wars is based off that. And you go, oh, yeah, Dune was just doing it first, and everyone else kind of cribbed it. So you see a lot of tropey stuff, but they did a really nice job with it. All the performances are spot on. Visuals are great. See it in the theater. See it on as big a screen as possible. We really enjoyed it. So I think you will too, but not as much as I think you listeners will enjoy Operation Disappearance, which is this week's G.I. Joe Mighty Marvel storybook. It is a gorgeous book. And to use the verbiage from 3djoes.com, quote, "This is quite possibly the most beautiful Joe book ever painted." He might be right. I'm assuming he is Carson. I'm assuming Carson Metaxas wrote that. It was released in 1983, just like last week's book, by Marvel Books under license from Hasbro. It's a small format digest size, so it's 4 inches by 5 inches. And it's credited to B.S. Watson, Ron Fontes, John Romita, and Earl Norem. Now, Earl Norem did that beautiful cover. You guys know his work. B.S. Watson, we believe, wrote it. Ron Fontes, it seems to be the production supervisor. And breakdowns were by John Romita. And then Earl Norem painted both the cover and the interiors. So you've got Earl Norem painting over John Romita. And Romita, if you're not a super comic historian, you've probably still heard his name. Massive talent. One of the, definitely of Marvel, one of the Mount Rushmore. He's definitely on the Mount Rushmore of Marvel Comics. Probably in top 10 of all time comic book, like across the board, including the Will Eisners of the world and all that stuff, cutting across all generations. John Romita is an absolute legend. And what he was really known for was his romance books. This is pre-Marvel. So he drew beautiful people, women, men, all of it. Gorgeous, gorgeous, really lush illustrations. And for example, he was the first one to draw Mary Jane Watson. So when you've seen that picture of Mary Jane in the doorway saying "Face a Tiger, you just hit the jackpot," that's John Romita. And that's his style. This is just curvy, very smooth lines. His son, of course, is John Romita Jr., which is funny because his son, who I'm a big fan of, his style goes kind of the exact opposite direction. And, whether that's, I'd love to find out if that's, was an intentional choice or whatever. But where Romita Jr.'s style is very blocky and very jagged and very rough, but powerful. Romita's was smooth but powerful, So a very realistic look. And like I said, he really cut his teeth and came to prominence on the romance books. So you have to do that kind of soap opera style. So we get a John Romita G.I. Joe book. That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. I love it. So we're going to check it out. We've got a great cover. It's nice shape. There's nice shapes and angles on this cover. So it's who do we got? Flash Breaker. I'm going to assume that that's supposed to be Hawk. It doesn't, I can't really tell. It looks like it is because it looks like they gave him the red collar. So I'm assuming that's Hawk on the cover, and Scarlet. And they're squaring off against Cobra Platoon that's coming up, it looks like maybe a staircase or something. And Cobra Commander is on the staircase, railing above, screaming at them. And what is great about this cover is this is a wonderful example of shapes in motion. Go to the page and look at this cover. I'm going to do my best to describe it. So the colors themselves are great. There's bright reds and yellows. If you remember from last week's show, we talked about the colors, how they pop. They really were nice, really vibrant. You get that in painted, especially at the time, because it's, they're doing their actual real paints. They're not painting on computers. But what you're seeing here is you're seeing a triangle just pointing your eye right to where they want you to turn the page. They want you to go right into the middle of the right side of the book, which is where you want to open the book and read it. Right? So from left to right, you've got this inverted triangle with the wide base on the left-hand side, and it cuts up from Hawk's feet through the top of these computer banks. And it kind of dissects Cobra Commander a little bit, but actually Cobra Commander is pretty much in line with that triangle too. It's a little off, but for the most part, he continues this triangle. And it puts you right into the center of the page where your eye is going to go, where your thumb is going to go to turn the page. And really, The Cobras themselves also fit into this, even though the angle of them is kind of off it. If you drew this as a full triangle, they would absolutely be inside of the triangle. All the action's happening inside of this triangle. It's really neat. Breaker's staring at the camera and pointing at something. Scarlet is pointing her Uzi at the Cobras. Hawk's pointing his M16 or M14 at the Cobras, of course. And Flash, although last week they called him Steeler, but Flash is there with his heavy duty laser, of course. But what's also great about this is Breaker's looking at you. Breaker is looking at the reader, and he's pointing exactly where this imaginary triangle ends at the vanishing point of this triangle. That's where Breaker's finger is going. It's great. It's really, really great. On the right side, there's kind of a French curve that Cobra Commander is standing on, right? So that adds this, it starts lower, so it starts kind of in the middle of Hawk's midsection, and it ends above Hawk's head. And what does that do? That just adds depth and size to this room that they're in, without being able to really draw the size of this room. You put this huge curve on the railing, then that takes it from just being a flat picture of Cobra Commander standing on a railing to saying it's such a big room, there's such perspective there that we're getting the full curvature of the room. There's a lot happening here, and I really, really like it. It's really great, and then obviously it's rendered really well too. So it's really cool. Check it out, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So G.I. Joe Operation Disappearance. We got a nice little cloud cover page, copyright 1983. And yeah, that was Hawk on the front, Hawk, Scarlet, Breaker, Flash, and Cobra. And moving on. Now here we go. 15 fighter planes don't just disappear into thin air. Well, that's what happened, Hawk, said General Flagg, commander of the top secret team known as Codename G.I. Joe. He was speaking to Hawk, the team's leader. Agents Scarlet, Breaker, and Flash listened carefully. I like that they had to say he was speaking to Hawk, because he said, hey, that's what happened, Hawk. And it's a great illustration. You know, it's basic, simple. They're sitting around a table. There's dossier and there's photos and all this stuff. Hawks. What's neat is they're all in their white t-shirts. So they're all chilling. They've got their green work pants on, so to speak, but they're all just like on a break. Even Scarlet, they're all just chilling. They're not wearing their uniforms. Although Breaker does have his uniform, bubblegum. Not only have our planes vanished, the general said, but fighters and bombers from many other nations have disappeared too. I've talked to military leaders of those nations, and we agree that the G.I. Joe team is the team for the job. The planes all disappeared at the same spot at sea, and that's where you'll begin. Now, following last week's craziness with that VTOL plane, there is a drawing of a plane here that is wild. Like it looks like, I think they're called the WACs, the radar planes that they had that giant radar dish on, I think during like Vietnam. And for some reason, that might be right, but pardon me. Just jumped in my head and never time to look it up. But it's this like rocket powered bus in the sky. It does not look like a plane. I don't know why we can't use planes. But it's flying, and it's with a bunch of seagulls. And that's... Oh, I see what's happening here. I apologize. I'm a dummy. That's the Joe's plane. So again, it is a matter of... oh, this is great. So I'm sorry. I'm doing this real time. What they're doing is they're not wasting any time. This is awesome. That's his overlay commentary. It's not describing the planes that have been gone missing. It's continuing. If you're watching a cartoon, they would have cut to this, and we would have known that it's the G.I. Joe plane. There's nothing on here to say G.I. Joe, and it certainly didn't look like G.I. Joe plane. But we would have continued to hear his voiceover as we see the Joes on their way to the mission. That's what's happening in this photo. I apologize for the confusion there. But I like it. And because the next page is just straight up the Joes diving into water. They're parachuting. They're all wearing scuba gear. Meet you in saltwater, said Scarlet, as she and other Joes put on their diving gear. With underwater jetpacks and laser rifles ready, the 4 Joes parachuted into the sea. Be sure to book me a window seat for the flight home, General, Breaker said as he sprang from the open hatch. So we've got the Joes jumping out into the ocean. Nice drawing, nice painting. I appreciate it. Lots of blues. Once underwater, the Joes talked by radios built into their diving masks. They began searching the area. It didn't take long for the team to spot trouble. Over there, Scarlet shouted. The Joes turned to find themselves face to face with agents of Cobra, the International Organization of Evil. Now, this plays out a lot like a James Bond movie. The one that he fought underwater, was that Thunderball, I believe? That's the whole vibe I'm getting from here. But they're all Joes are in like generic gray SEAL suits, and we don't see what the Cobras look like yet. But the Joes have scuba gear that's not terribly unreminiscent of what Wetsuit's helmet would look like. It's not, dead on. It's not a 1-to-1, but it's not terribly far from it. So that's cool. I wonder if this had any influence on their design for Wetsuit, for real. They certainly, the torpedo look of the gray, just the gray look, that's certainly similar to what torpedo would be. Obviously, this is pre-torpedo. It's also pre-Cobra eels. So let's see what the Cobras look like. And there they are. The next page, you just get fighting underwater. And this is straight out of that James Bond movie. But you've got, there's one shot of one of the Joes. I don't know who it is. It's not Scarlet, because you can see Scarlet up top. And then, but one of the Joes it absolutely could be Wetsuit from above. But they're all fighting underwater. They're all shooting lasers. One of the Joes is getting hit in the chest. They're very outnumbered. These Cobra scuba divers. 1, 2, there's 3, there's 6, there's like 9 of them versus 4 Joes. So they're definitely outnumbered. Watch your back, Breaker, Hawk yelled as underwater lasers shot at them. Help me, Hawk, Scarlet's voice was cut off suddenly. The Joes fought hard, but they were outnumbered. See, I told you. Only Hawk and Flash got away. In seconds, the fight was over. The Cobra Frogmen got Scarlet and Breaker, shouted Flash. Oh, sorry, hold on. Flash is Italian. The Cobra Frogmen, they got the Scarlet and Breaker, shouted Flash. It all happened so quickly, I couldn't help them. Come on, cried Hawk. We've got to find them. So they're kind of crouched in some coral. And this is all lovingly painted. They even put a little shark in the background. So I'm assuming that was Breaker getting shot in the chest in the previous page. So it looks good. Look out. It's a Cobra sub, said Hawk, as they found themselves being drawn towards it. This must be the backup unit, Flash said. The pull is too strong. I can't break loose. It looks like they've got us too, buddy, said Hawk. In seconds, they were inside. And they're getting hoovered up. Picture like an underwater vacuum. They're getting hoovered up into a Cobra submarine. These 2 pages feels like they were written after they got the final pictures back. And Romita and Norem were like, we're not doing any more pictures. Here's your story. Because come on, you go from come on, we've got to find them to look out, we're getting attacked by a sub. And on the previous page, the come on, we got to find them is very much like the picture shows that they're hiding from Cobra. So let's in the dialogue say that they're not, they're just regrouping to go get them. And then in the next page, the picture says their hiding didn't work. They got caught. So the dialogue is trying to butch them up a little bit, I guess is what I'm saying. Meanwhile, Breaker and Scarlet were carried along by the Cobra Frogmen. Their hands were tied. Suddenly, Breaker saw where they were headed. An underwater dome, said Breaker. Scarlet nodded and added, I hope Hawk and Flash are all right. She's like, we're the ones that are captured. But man, I hope Hawk and Flash are, which I guess from their perspective, they could be dead, and that's why they're not with him. So that makes sense. In the distance, it's a Cobra underwater base, very reminiscent of the stuff you'd get on the cartoon, the stuff you would get in any cartoons of the era. Like a sprawling underwater base, Cobra logo on top, with nodes and domes and things like that. But we still there's no personality from any of the Cobra frogmen. So now we cut back to Hawk and Flash in their submarine. "We're our friends," said Hawk. "They're in good hands, you can be sure," said the Cobra agent, "as you will soon be too." Hawk and Flash found themselves on the cold metal floor of a storeroom inside the Cobra sub. "Well, if they've been hurt, I'll make you pay somehow," said Hawk, even though he was helpless. I like that, even though he was helpless. They just want to rub that in. But really, is Hawk ever helpless? Is he? I feel like he's not. But they're getting thrown into a storage room, and I got to say, this drawing of these two grown men getting thrown into this captivity room by traditionally looking masked Cobra troopers, it feels like a drawing from a Hardy Boys novel. Like the Hardy Boys just got captured in the mine, and how are they going to get out? As for Scarlet and Breaker, they were facing an old foe at that very moment. "Well, well, G.I. Joe agents, the fishing was good today, I see," said the cold voice of the Cobra commander, leader of the evil organization. They had met before. The G.I. Joe team had come close to stopping him many times, almost daily at 3 p.m., you would say, but each time he escaped, only to return with a new scheme for evil doing. And you've got this is a cool picture. It's the back. You see the back of Cobra's chair. You see about half of his Cobra insignia on it, and this insignia is spot on to what the Cobra insignia looks like. Remember last week that Cobra insignia looked a little weird. This one looks good. And over the shoulder of Cobra Commander sitting there, it's hooded Cobra Commander. Although if you look closely, his hood does have the white outline on it. But the Cobra Troopers themselves, they have the non-white outline Cobra logo. And Breaker and Scarlet, they're on their knees in front of a machine gun toting Cobra soldier. In the distance, there's good depth of field on this. There's a dude working at a computer, and then beyond him, there's a bunch of dudes staring at open ports or computer screens or something. So it's a good depth of field. Like it's almost as if this was drawn by a legendary professional. "Welcome to my undersea fort," the Cobra Commander said. "You'll soon see the next step in my plan for world rule." If I could only get my hands on him, thought Scarlet. She had a black belt in karate, but she would have to wait for a chance to use her skill. And Scarlet's bound, Breaker's still bound too. Cobra Commander has stood up from his throne chair. Now, his throne looks different from picture to picture. Like, well, I guess maybe not. So what I mean is there's in this one, which is a great drawing. It's a great drawing of Cobra Commander, painting rather. It's a great painting of Cobra Commander. He's standing with his hands on his hips. He's got his full like military regalia. He's got the ropes over his shoulder, the cords over his shoulder. He's got the sash cutting across. He's got a gold knife on his belt. He's got his pistol. Like he looks great. Behind the chair he was sitting in is this giant stand-up Cobra headpiece or headboard thing that wasn't in the previous picture, but I guess technically it could still be further behind him a little bit. So anyway, and then we got more Cobra Troopers and more background. It's great, but there's a nice hero shot of Cobra Commander. "All is ready, Commander. The airplane should be overhead any moment now." "Good. You may begin. Now you will see the secret of this fort." It's very Emperor, I guess. Cobra agents began running around. The control room resembled a beehive. Agents ran, controls were set, and the hum of powerful machines filled the air. So this is a great drawing of a bunch of Cobra Troopers spinning dials and stuff. Like it's just, they're literally pointing at things and turning knobs and pressing buttons. And what's cool for a good, like, again, James Bondy kind of way, there's a sewer drawn in there. Like there's a sewer hole. Now, I don't know if that's going to come in handy, but like it's that idea of it's not a finished, furnished living kind of place. This is an undersea base that's here for business. And so sure, we're going to have things like drainage tunnels, things like that. I really think that's what's happening there. I like it. Nice 2-page spread here. It's a U.S. Air Force jet. Scarlet felt a rumbling. Suddenly, the entire dome rose to the surface of the sea. The glass rolled back, and a beam fired at a passing plane. Right on time, laughed Cobra Commander. So that's how the planes have been disappearing, thought Scarlet. The plane was pulled into the dome by the beam, as the others before it had been. The glass rolled back into place, and the entire fort returned to the bottom of the sea. The operation was smooth, silent, and fast. I only hope Hawk and Flash made out better than we did, thought Breaker. So, Cobra's popping up to the surface, and they're using a tractor beam to pull these airplanes into their underwater base, and that's how they're stealing these airplanes. This is like a U.S. Air Force, like, I don't know, F-15 or something, getting snagged out of midair, like getting pulled under. It's nice. Again, great blues, great greens in this whole issue. At that very moment, on board the Cobra sub, Hawk had thought of a plan. He gave a hand signal to Flash and released stun gas from a hidden pocket on his belt. Put on your gas mask, he cried to Flash as Cobra agents began falling to the floor. Within minutes, they had gained control of the sub. Okay. Last we saw, they were thrown into a storage locker. And now, not only does he have enough sleeping gas to knock out the whole sub, they also have gas masks on them. That's awesome. Hey, it's economy of storytelling, everyone. Economy of storytelling. So now they're pulling an Indiana Jones, and they're putting on the Cobra gear of the troops that they just knocked out. So they're trying to fit their heads into these Cobra helmets. Hey, this helmet is uncomfortable, said Flash. Yeah, but it'll let us move around that base without being recognized, replied Hawk. They put on Cobra uniforms, too. Hawk and Flash soon found themselves at Cobra's domed fort, although soon to be doomed, I'm sure. We have captured the 2 other Joes, Hawk said into the radio. Good, bring them to me, said Cobra Commander. So they're doing a classic Trojan horse. Once inside, the 2 disguised Joes tried to find Cobra Commander's control room. Suddenly, they arrived at a large prison block. Well, this must be where the pilots of the missing planes are kept, Flash whispered. Let us release them. No, said Hawk, also in a whisper. We'll blow our cover. We'll have to get them later. And the picture there is them in disguise walking right past all the captured pilots and stuff. And it looks like you've got pilots from all over the world, all over the various institutions of pilotry. But it's cool. Hawk's got the gun up to his shoulder, the rifle rather. It's nice. It's nice strong. Now here's the plan, began Hawk just outside of Cobra Commander's control room. Hawk told his plan to Flash, who nodded and ran off silently. Didn't have time to tell us, though, because that's literary suspense. All eyes stared at Hawk as he entered the control room. Where are the 2 captured Joes? Cobra Commander asked. There's a lot of, especially in these early Joes, I've seen this before, there's a lot of SIG hailing going on. There's a lot of hands raised hailing people. Cobra Commander's doing a full-on SIG hail salute. Troopers doing a full-on SIG hail salute. And if we're to be believed, that's Hawk doing a full-on SIG hail salute. Because we also see Flash walking away in this drawing. So, lots of that going on in these early comics. Right here, pal, was Hawk's reply as he whipped off his Cobra mask. Cobra Commander recognized his old enemy. Capture him! I had to pause and restart. That sent me into a coughing jag. Cobra Commander screamed at his men. Hawk began shooting in all directions. Equipment exploded. Hawk was a one-man wrecking crew. I mean, first of all, as plans go, I feel like he jumped the gun. Like, he just walked in that room and started shooting. There was no like, hey, why don't you let me take your prisoners? I'll escort them personally back to the jail. None of that. He just runs into this room, whips off his helmet, announces his intentions, and then, quote, began shooting in all directions. Hawk is on a tear. It's a great shot, though. The helmet's, you can see his left hand, he's ripped the helmet off, the red bandanas off his face. There's an explosion on the Cobra Trooper, so you get everything represented. Cobra Commander's in his chair, like, pointing and screaming. Scarlet takes the moment to knock out her guard. It's good. Breaker, by the way, ineffectual and useless so far. He's done nothing but be captured. I like that Scarlet's the active protagonist here. I take that back. Stop! Screamed Cobra Commander above the roar of the battle, and suddenly all was silent. He had a laser pistol pressed against Scarlet's head. So Scarlet was being, a protagonist and fighting back, and yet she's also going to be the hostage here. But, however, I don't take back the part about Breaker, because it says, Breaker stood, helpless. Hawk, laser rifle still warm in his hands, froze in his tracks. There was nothing they could do. This really is a cool picture. It's definitely got a very Romita-y look. We talk about Romita as women, like the way the way he drew their faces, and this is a very Romita look. The eyebrows scream it, the cheeks scream it, and it's Scarlet. She looks great. She's got a pistol pressed in her face. That's not good. Now, now I have you as my prisoners, Cobra Commander said. Hey, wrong, a voice rang out from above. All heads turned to Flash, who was sliding down a cable from above. So Flash is literally one hand on a cable that just luckily is hanging there, and he's sliding down, his foot out, he's shooting at people. Flash is making his Italian entrance. That was all Scarlet needed. With cat-like speed, she struck with a powerful karate kick. Here's a little something to remember me by, Scarlet said, as Cobra Commander hit the floor. And yeah, she's kicking him right in the face. It's great. I like that earlier they seeded that she knew karate. That was pretty cool. So it's a nice callback there. On this drawing, there's a very subtle thing that they're doing with it that I think is so smart, and I gotta think was on purpose. So the way they've drawn it's pretty much spot on. Camera at the midsection, just not a weird angle or anything. And as she kicks Cobra Commander, he's falling backwards. But what they've chosen to do here is his mask is 100% still on his face, but for the first time, we see underneath it a little bit. We see just a touch of his neck, right? And why is that? Right? It's to show that he's been rocked. She literally kicked him in the face, and they're not going to reveal his face, obviously. But when the mask is fully down and you don't see anything, he's in power. In this drawing, where you see, him getting kicked, but you also you see some of the human beneath it. It really humanizes him. It really shows that, shows his weakness. Hope that makes sense. But it is jarring to see because you typically don't see that, especially when he's got the hood on. Everything's always covered up. So this is nice. Flash was down the cable in seconds. Oh, real quick. Oh, no, yeah, they're wearing. Sorry, I thought about something else. They're wearing their eel uniforms. So I was like, Flash wasn't in his red, but he was down the cable in seconds. He raced across the room to his two friends, whipped out a knife, and cut the ropes that bound them. Thanks, buddy, said Breaker. I needed that. Also, because I haven't done anything in this story. For sure, added Scarlet. She said, what's her name for the Janice for the Electric Mayhem. For sure, added Scarlet, rubbing her sore wrists. Anytime, said Flash. Hey, how about a little help? Screamed Hawk from across the room, and the three entered the fight. So Hawk's been fighting them the whole time while they're just thanking each other for cutting their bonds. Cool picture. They're all free. There's lots of dead soldiers on the ground. There's lots of smoke and explosions, and Hawk's in the distance going like, hey, what's up? The Joes did not notice a man sneaking away from battle. He made his way through the halls, ending up in a small escape sub. They have stopped me this time, but I'll fix them, Cobra Commander said to himself. Even in his head, he speaks weird. And he's hunched over some controls of like an escape sub. Very cool here. They have him really hunched over, and it feels super cramped, which is what you want in this type of moment, because you want him to feel small. You want to convey that he's in a very small, like, escape pod kind of getaway vehicle. Like if he was comfortable and sitting in like a, open air pilot seat, it wouldn't have this urgency that this drawing absolutely does. There's an urgency to this that's great. Even the backlight in this image. Now, this book has been mostly yellows and blues. It really has. There's red backlight that's illuminating this whole shot, which is red is danger. It's really great, really smart. I like this drawing a lot. This drawing says a lot. Even if you didn't know anything about, if this picture itself, you could look at this and go, don't know anything about the story and be like, oh, that dude's retreating. Like in that moment. Absolutely. Now to make my escape. My one-man sub should serve me well. I will be back. With that, the small craft shot from the dome like a bullet and disappeared from sight. So we've got a Cobra, weird-looking Cobra sub thing shooting underwater, so it's taking off. Well, this whole place is going to blow up, screamed Flash above the roar of the battle. We've got less than 5 minutes to get out. Let's free the pilots and get to the planes. It's our only chance. And it's Hawk pointing at a destruct sequence panel. Arm, failsafe on. So it is armed and ready to blow. So they know this thing's going up. It's a fun drawing of I think that's Hawk. Very screamy Hawk. The four Joes ran from the control room. The Cobra agents forgot the fight and started running for the nearest escape subs. Well, stand back, said Breaker as the Joes came to the prisoner block. I'm about to do something. Finally, he used a laser pistol. In seconds, the pilots were free. Hey, I'll set the controls to raise the dome, and join you when we're at the sea level, Flash told the other Joes, who were now boarding an American bomber. The other pilots jumped into their planes, too. So, it's actually Breaker looking kind of like Jack Knight Starman with these welder goggles on, and he's blowing his bubble as he uses this laser pistol to open up the jail cell. And there are some delighted pilots over his shoulder, just grinning ear to ear. I'd like to think one of those pilots could be Slipstream, being like, hey, this is how I met the Joes. I'll say this. Remember last story, they mislabeled Steeler as Flash. And now, in this story, they give Flash a lot of the story, but the one time they need to use a laser, they don't give it to Flash. And the one time that you need someone to work like controls and then communicate to people like, hey, we're clear, let's get out of here, they give that, they don't give that to Breaker. Breaker should have been like, I'll go take care of the technical stuff. Flash, you laser this door. These stories have completely gone backwards. And now we've got a dialogue-less image of Flash, setting the control. So this dome is opening up top, and there's all these stolen airplanes. How they're going to take off, I have absolutely no idea. There's no runway here. Remember, they were brought in on this weird tractor beam. So we're going to find out. And they don't even deal with it. The jets just take off. The dome once again rose to sea level, and the glass rolled back. Only this time, instead of taking in planes, it released a stream of pilots happy to fly away free. As the last plane cleared the dome, the pilots looked back to see the fort explode in a brilliant fireball, a blaze that marked the end, at least for now, of Cobra's evil work. The pilots from around the world thanked the Joes by radio and headed home. It's a cool image. It doesn't really work because how did any of these planes take off? But it is a very cool image. There's a bunch of different types of planes. One absolutely looks like the Bat plane. Not even joking. Right in the middle. But a bunch of cool planes. They're all flying away. They're all rocketing from this massive explosion in the ocean, which the ocean is colored red to show the anger of this explosion, or all the blood of all the dead fish that just happened from exploding this bunker underseas. One thing that still puzzles me, said Flash to the other Joes. What did the Cobra Commander want with all of those planes anyway? Well, easy. Sorry, it's Scarlet. Easy. He planned to brainwash the pilots, then use them to attack their home nations, said Scarlet. Well, I have only one question, said Breaker. Where's the stewardess? I'm starving. Ha ha. You haven't done anything, Breaker. Why are you hungry? And he's kicking back on this plane, bubblegum popping out of his mouth. Everyone's staring at him incredulous, like you were just baggage on this plane, and you're complaining, you're hungry, and the Joes are flying away, and that's it, everyone, for Operation Disappearance with an exclamation mark after disappearance. I love it. I thought it was a lot of fun. It is a gorgeous looking book, man. It's really good. This illustration is very evocative. Very much feels like old gold key covers. You remember those? Like the Dell comic book covers. This whole issue feels like each illustration could be one of those, or some part of one of those. It's very cool. This, looking back, all of the ones that stand out, this Cobra Commander hunched over that escape pod drawing. That painting is gorgeous. It's really, really good. The paintings, the jets flying away is really great. Cobra Commander standing up in front of his chair for the first time. We get the first look at him. That looks great. The full page spread of them all underwater, like out of a James Bond movie rather. That's really nice. Like it's good. It's a good looking book. So remember, go to 3djoes.com. Just search for Operation Disappearance. You'll find it, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I believe this is all they did. If they, I want to have seen them do a third one so I could see if they also included Flash and also screwed up all the whatever character is supposed to be doing, because Breaker didn't do anything, and everything Flash is supposed to do keeps getting given to other people. So, anywhoots, I love it. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed it as well, and I will see you next week, or rather, you'll hear me next week. And now you, Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.